So when we're talking about mediation in a high income situation, you really again want to break it down to what are we mediating? Mediation can cover a variety of topics. It could be about your kids, it could be about businesses, it could be about assets. And anytime you're having mediation, there's a couple things you need to keep in mind. The mediator doesn't work for you, they don't work for your spouse. They're there to help facilitate an agreement. And really, the only way this is going to work is if everyone kind of has the same information. So, when we're talking about custody or parenting time, decision making, most mediators are familiar with that. Whether they have children or they've been around it, they understand the complexities that go involved in that. We just got to figure out what makes sense for you and your family on a day to day basis when it comes to parenting time and then decision making. Now, mediation during a high asset divorce for financials, it's really important that the mediator has the qualifications necessary based upon your situation. And what I mean by that is if you have high net worth, but you have traditional income such as W-2 wage earners, then a mediator might be able to help facilitate that. But if there are complex assets or there's privately held companies or shell companies, for lack of a better word, it's important that the mediator has the same information as everyone involved. Because if one person has more information than the mediator and the other side, it's not really a fair situation because one person is playing with more information. Information needs to be shared freely in order for mediation to work. So in order to walk out of it, you got to make sure that everyone has access to everything. Now, in order to do that, you may want to make sure you have proper discovery done before you go into financial mediation. Mediation can actually help facilitate agreements. Let's assume that we've done proper discovery. Now, we have some other videos put together for some discovery. We go into more details about that, but you need to get all the information to either help you reach an agreement or ultimately convince the judge of your position. Let's assume that you have everything. Okay, great. Now we need to make sure that that is all understood and that everybody has everything. We also need to make sure that the mediator is given that information. They may not need everything, but they need an appropriate amount of information so that they can help facilitate this. If there are complex issues, the mediator must know about it, or at the very least, both parties need to have the exact same information. If we have all the information and everyone's on the same page, it really can be beneficial. I often tell people mediation doesn't have to resolve everything. And that's a really, really important thing. So, for example, let's say you go into mediation and there are 50 issues that you have to resolve. If you walk out of mediation saying, we've got 40 issues resolved and we have these 10 issues that we don't agree upon, well, my question will be, does the outcome of these 10 issues have any impact on those? So in other words, if we agree on these 40 issues, regardless of what happens here, that's great. We've got a partial judgment already in the works. So these things can be resolved. And now we just need to say, okay, we agree to disagree on these issues, and we'll bring just these issues to a judge. By narrowing these issues, it can save you so much time and money by making only that small amount an issue. And therefore, a 2-week trial might be shrunk down to 2, 3, 4 days, which is going to save you so much in attorney's fees and expert costs and other things that you can now keep for your family. When going into mediation, I think it's really important to understand that there is not a uniform process to expect, and it's really up to the mediator to decide how that might look. Some mediators might want to bring everybody into the room and start off together. Some mediators set things up where there might be 3 different meeting spots where they might have a room for everyone, individual rooms for each party. There's not a one size fits all. So if you really want to know all those details, you're going to want to contact your mediator. But a good mediator is going to have to understand that eventually it's important to get everyone in the same room. If you're going through a divorce, you may not feel the best about your spouse. And sometimes you are going to have pent up emotions and feelings, and that can come out at any point in time. You might be sitting there at that mediation table and something gets said, and a good mediator is going to be able to take really harsh negative language and try to translate it into something that's palatable. And a good mediator is going to recognize, do I need to separate these two and go back and forth between them? Or can I sit in the room and try and help facilitate the deal between the two of them? Unfortunately, there's not a one size fits all approach, and it's going to be up to the mediator. But I just want you to understand it's a great process. Be open to whatever may come about. and hopefully it'll get you closer to the end. Mediation is not appropriate in all situations. So let's take a step back. If there's any domestic violence or physical intimidation or threats of anything like that, mediation is not going to work. Now, there's some ways around it. With technology, you might be able to do Zoom or different things where you don't even have to see the other person, but it doesn't work if one person cannot or will not participate. Mediation only works if people are willing to do it. So if one side is being dragged into the room, what's the point? Because it has to be an agreement. It has to be a voluntary agreement. If someone feels forced to do it, it's not going to stand in court. The judge is not going to force somebody to do something they don't want to do. So it doesn't make sense. And then finally, the last time it might not make sense is if there's a complex situation where one person has superior information to everybody else. In that situation, mediation is not going to be successful. So if you've been asked to do mediation or you're considering mediation and you're a high net worth individual, reach out to our office and we can go over all the pros and cons of how it might actually impact your situation before you start.